We at Debo's Tales are truly overwhelmed by the love and support from each of you watching today. You're not just viewers, you're the heart of this channel, and every like, share, and subscribe lights up this journey. From all corners of America and the rest of the world, your kindness and belief inspire me to keep telling these stories. You too can still make your impact count. It's never too late to step that great step. Please join our family by subscribing and sharing. We're stronger together, and we are so grateful to have you here. Now, let's start with today's powerful story. A stranger's kindness saved her from the darkest Halloween. Victoria Reed stood trembling on the corner of Royal Street and St. Philip, her thin flapper dress clinging to her as a cold wind swept through the New Orleans night. Beads from her dress caught the dim light, but her mascara streaked down her face, and her hair was a tangled mess. Her phone was dead. Her purse gone. Crowds of laughing partygoers in Halloween costumes passed by, but none stopped. Just an hour ago, she had been smiling beside her boyfriend, thinking this weekend would bring them closer. Instead, he confessed he'd been cheating for months, then left her in the middle of the French Quarter like she was nothing. Now, every shadow felt alive, every footstep behind her seemed to follow. This was supposed to be a night filled with love and laughter. Instead, it became the night Victoria thought she might not make it home. What she didn't know was that a stranger's unexpected kindness was about to save her life, and change it forever. Have you ever been completely lost in a strange city with nowhere to turn? Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story will touch your heart in ways you'll never forget. Now, let's see how one act of compassion turned Victoria's darkest Halloween into a moment of hope. Come with us to the very beginning. Victoria Reed had dreamed about this trip for months. She had packed her best dresses, planned her outfits carefully, and saved every spare dollar she could. After 2 years of long-distance dating, she was finally going to spend a full weekend with David in New Orleans. The city had always fascinated her, its jazz, its food, its color, but most of all, the promise that this Halloween getaway would mark a new beginning for them. David had told her it would be romantic. He had promised dinners overlooking the Mississippi, candlelight walks through the Garden District, and music under the stars. She had believed him. Their relationship had been built on compromise. Victoria had left her photography dreams behind to follow David's career moves, first to Dallas, then Chicago, and now, she thought, New Orleans might be their new start. She'd told herself that love meant patience, that eventually her sacrifices would be worth it. When she stepped off the plane that Friday afternoon, she'd been full of hope. She wore the vintage flapper dress David loved, packed for the Halloween party he said would be unforgettable. He greeted her at the airport with his usual charm, but something felt different. His hug was quick, his phone kept buzzing, and he seemed distracted during dinner. Still, she brushed it off, telling herself travel stress and work pressure could explain it. The following evening, Bourbon Street pulsed with life, bright costumes, brass bands, and laughter spilling into the night. The crowd was electric. Victoria clung to David's arm, feeling proud to finally be part of something joyful after so many lonely months apart. But as they pushed through the sea of people into a packed bar, she sensed tension in him. He was drinking faster than usual, barely listening when she spoke. When she asked if everything was okay, he sighed, looked away, and muttered, "We need to talk." She could barely hear him over the music, but his expression froze her. He didn't look angry, he looked trapped. Before she could respond, he blurted out the truth. He'd been seeing someone else. For months. He said it quietly, almost casually, like he was confessing a minor mistake. Victoria's chest tightened. The noise around her faded into a blur. She asked him to repeat it, hoping she'd misheard, but his eyes said everything. Her knees weakened. The people around them kept dancing, laughing, shouting. Nobody noticed the woman whose world had just fallen apart. She stumbled out of the bar, blinking against the neon lights, tears threatening to spill. Her legs carried her aimlessly down the crowded street. The sounds of trumpets and drums surrounded her, but she couldn't feel any of it. Every step felt heavier. She didn't know how long she wandered before someone bumped into her. At first, she thought it was another drunk tourist. She mumbled an apology and kept walking. But seconds later, she noticed the strap of her purse had been sliced clean through. She spun around, but the crowd swallowed the thief instantly. Her purse, her phone, wallet, hotel key, everything was gone. Panic hit hard. She reached into her pocket, finding only the lip gloss she'd carried separately. The realization struck. She couldn't even remember the exact address of the bed and breakfast David had booked. It was in Marigny, she thought, near a coffee shop with murals, but that wasn't enough. Victoria tried to ask for help, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos around her. A man in a skeleton costume shouted something she couldn't hear. A woman laughed and offered her a plastic cup of beer, thinking she was part of the show. Two teenagers in vampire makeup pointed and took pictures, assuming her smeared mascara was deliberate. Her throat tightened. She was invisible to everyone, just another face in the Halloween crowd. She pressed herself against a wall to think, trying to slow her breathing. She told herself she could find her way back by memory, but the streets looked different now, warped by fear. She started walking toward what she thought was the direction of her hotel. As she turned down a side street, a man in a devil costume brushed past her. She flinched, muttering sorry, but he didn't move on. He slowed his steps, glancing back with a smirk. When she turned another corner, he followed. At first, she told herself she was imagining it, until she stopped near a row of iron gates and heard his footsteps stop too. Her pulse quickened. She started walking faster. The crowd was thinning now, the noise of Bourbon Street fading behind her. Each step echoed louder. When she crossed to the opposite sidewalk, he crossed too. His mask covered half his face, and his movements were lazy, confident, as though he knew she had nowhere to go. Victoria's chest tightened. She reached for her phone out of habit, but her hand met empty air. Her mouth went dry. She scanned the street for open doors, bars, restaurants, anything, but the nearby windows were dark. Music echoed faintly in the distance, but here, the laughter had faded. She picked up her pace. Her heels clacked against the pavement, quick and uneven. The man's steps followed, unhurried. Her mind screamed to run, but fear rooted her. She kept looking back, hoping she was wrong, hoping he'd turn away. He didn't. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as she passed another dark alley, gripping the beaded fringe of her dress as though it could protect her. All she wanted now was to find light, any person, any place that wasn't this. It was Halloween in New Orleans, meant to be magical, full of laughter and love. Instead, Victoria was alone, frightened, and walking straight into the night that would test everything she thought she knew about people, safety, and kindness. The temperature began to drop as the night stretched on, the humid warmth of early evening replaced by a sharp October chill that crept through Victoria's dress. The thin vintage flapper outfit, chosen because David had once told her she looked beautiful in it, now felt like a cruel reminder of his betrayal. The sequins that had once caught the light so playfully now clung cold against her skin, every breeze slicing through her bare arms. She wrapped her arms around herself and kept walking, trying to blend into the last traces of the Halloween crowd. Music still echoed faintly from Bourbon Street, but she was moving away from it now, unintentionally drawn toward quieter streets. The laughter and brass bands faded behind her until only the sound of her heels against cracked pavement remained. Storefronts became less decorated, their windows dark. The buildings here were older, their balconies covered in rusting ironwork and drooping vines. A few streetlights flickered overhead, their weak yellow glow casting patches of light that made the shadows seem even deeper. Trash from the celebrations, plastic beads, confetti, paper cups, drifted along the curb, pushed by the wind like tiny ghosts of the party she'd left behind. Victoria told herself she just needed to find a main road again. She tried to remember which way the river was, which direction led back toward her hotel. Every turn looked familiar yet wrong, like a maze that shifted when she wasn't looking. Her heartbeat thumped in her ears. She glanced behind her. No one. Then she heard it again. Footsteps. Slow. Even. Measured. She froze. The sound stopped. She waited, her breath clouding in the cold air. Maybe it was just an echo. Or another lost tourist. She started walking again, this time faster. The steps returned, keeping rhythm with hers. She turned down another street, this one narrower, the kind of alley tourists were warned to avoid. Her chest tightened, but she kept going because the thought of turning back was worse. The steps followed. Her mind flooded with every story she'd ever read about women who vanished while traveling. She remembered news reports, whispered warnings, her mother's voice telling her to always stay where there were people. But there were no people here, only the occasional shout from blocks away, the muffled bass from a bar she couldn't see, and those footsteps. Her pace quickened, shoes slipping on uneven cobblestones. The air felt thicker now, heavy with dampness and fear. She tried to calm herself, whispering under her breath, it's fine, you're just lost." But her voice sounded small, like it didn't believe its own lie. A broken streetlight buzzed overhead, flashing weakly before going dark completely. The world seemed to shrink around her, the narrow street stretching endlessly in both directions. The iron balconies above her looked like cages, their shadows long and crooked across the walls. The footsteps grew louder. She turned sharply, pressing herself against a building, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was behind her. Nothing. Just movement in the distance, a flash of red fabric, maybe part of a costume, or maybe a trick of the light. Her breathing turned shallow. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but her legs felt heavy. She forced herself forward, her arms trembling. The city that had looked so enchanting hours ago now felt like it was closing in on her, every doorway hiding danger, every alley whispering threats she couldn't see. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but who would hear her here? The last group of costumed partiers had disappeared several blocks ago. She was utterly alone. The thought of David hit her again like a slap, how he had left her without a second thought, how she had given up everything for someone who could walk away so easily. Anger sparked beneath the fear, but it didn't make her feel any stronger. It only made the cold bite harder. The footsteps grew quicker. Closer. She broke into a near run, clutching her skirt to keep from tripping. Her heels clattered against the pavement, echoing through the narrow street. Her heart hammered so loudly she could barely hear anything else. She turned left, then right, trying to find any sign of life, open lights, a car passing, a door that wasn't locked. Nothing. Her lungs burned as she slowed, trying to listen. The steps behind her had stopped again. She looked over her shoulder and saw only the empty street. A breeze stirred an abandoned mask lying in the gutter. Maybe whoever it was had turned back. Maybe she was safe. But when she took one cautious step forward, she heard it again, a single footfall, deliberate, steady. Terror surged through her. She broke into a sprint, ignoring the pain in her feet, ignoring the way the beads on her dress snagged against her legs. She turned another corner and nearly stumbled over a pile of trash bags. The smell of damp leaves and stale beer filled the air. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The thought of pounding on doors crossed her mind. She stopped in front of an old townhouse, its windows dark, shutters closed. Should she knock? What if no one answered? Or worse, what if the wrong person did? She pressed her hand against the wooden door but couldn't bring herself to hit it. Tears burned behind her eyes. This city had once felt alive, full of charm and warmth. Now it felt cold and watchful, like it was turning against her. Every creak, every rustle made her jump. She could feel the night pressing closer, the silence growing heavier. Victoria backed away from the door, forcing herself to keep moving. Her hands were shaking so badly she could hardly keep her balance. Her only thought now was survival. Find light, find safety, find someone. She walked faster, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. The footsteps had vanished again, but the dread stayed. She could almost sense eyes on her from the upper balconies, from behind those lace curtains that swayed faintly in the wind. For the first time in her life, she truly believed she might not make it through the night. Somewhere in the distance, faint music returned, a slow jazz tune from what sounded like an old radio. It was the only sign that life still existed nearby. Gathering what strength she had left, Victoria followed the sound, praying it would lead her toward light instead of deeper into the dark. Victoria's breath came in shallow bursts as she rounded another corner, her pulse still racing. The streets ahead were nearly empty, silent except for the distant rustle of wind through the oak trees. She was just about to give up, ready to collapse on the curb and cry, when a faint glow caught her eye. At first, she thought she was imagining it, a soft green light flickering through the darkness. She squinted and saw it clearly, a neon sign that read Thibodeau's Market. The letters buzzed faintly, half the bulbs dim, but to her, it looked like salvation. The small corner store stood alone at the intersection, its front windows glowing warm and golden. A hand-painted sign above the door read family-owned since 1963. Her heart leapt. It didn't matter what kind of place it was, open meant safe. Victoria broke into a run, her heels clicking wildly against the pavement. The last 50 feet felt like forever. When she reached the door, she pulled it open so hard the small bell above it jingled frantically. Inside was another world. The air was warm and smelled like coffee, baked bread, and something sweet, cinnamon maybe. The hum of an old refrigerator and the faint melody of a radio replaced the eerie silence outside. For the first time in hours, Victoria felt human again. A soft voice came from behind the counter. "Well now," it said, calm but full of concern. "You look like you've been through the wars." Victoria turned toward the voice. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman, no taller than 5 feet, with silver hair pulled neatly into a bun. Her face was lined but gentle, her brown eyes alert and kind. She wore a purple cardigan over floral dress and sensible shoes. Her expression softened when she saw Victoria trembling. "You're safe now, sugar," the woman said, her Cajun accent gentle but firm. "Come sit down before you fall down." Those words, "You're safe now," broke something open inside Victoria. Her chest heaved, and the tears she had been holding back since Bourbon Street finally spilled over. She stumbled toward the small wooden counter, gripping it for balance. Without hesitation, the woman rounded the counter, guided her to a chair near a small space heater, and wrapped a thick plaid blanket around her shoulders. "There now," she murmured, adjusting the blanket. "We'll get you warm again." Victoria tried to speak, but her throat closed. She managed a weak, I don't have any money. My purse was stolen." The woman waved off her words. "Hush with that talk. You don't need money to sit and breathe. What you need is something hot in your hands." She poured a steaming cup of coffee from a silver percolator and set it in front of Victoria. The smell was rich and earthy, chicory coffee, strong and comforting. Then came a slice of sweet potato pie, still warm, its sugary crust glistening under the fluorescent lights. Victoria tried to protest again, but the woman shook her head. "Eat, baby. Talk after." For a moment, Victoria just stared at the cup, the steam curling upward like a lifeline. The warmth seeped into her fingers. Slowly, she took a sip. It was bitter and sweet at the same time, grounding her back into her body. Her shaking started to ease. The woman pulled up a chair across from her. "Name's Celeste," she said simply. "Been running this place since my husband passed. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Victoria," she whispered. Celeste nodded. "Well, Victoria, you don't have to say a word till you're ready. But when you are, I'm right here." Something about the certainty in her tone made it easy to speak. "So," Victoria did. The words poured out like a flood, the betrayal at the bar, the panic on the streets, the mugging, the footsteps that had haunted her through the quarter. Celeste listened without interrupting, her face calm and steady, her small hand resting on Victoria's forearm whenever her voice broke. When Victoria finished, she wiped her eyes and whispered, "I don't even know how I ended up here. I just kept walking." Celeste gave a small smile. Sometimes our feet know where to go before our heads do. Halloween night in New Orleans can be dangerous, sure, but it can also be magical. Victoria blinked, not understanding. Celeste leaned back, folding her hands. "People think it's all costumes and parades, but there's more to it. It's a night when things come to light. Truth, fear, kindness. Sometimes we walk through the dark to find what we were missing." Her words were soft, but they carried weight. Victoria felt a lump in her throat again, not from fear this time, but from relief. Celeste stood and started tidying the counter, her movements slow but steady. "You're not going back out there tonight. Not in that dress. Not with no phone or money. You'll stay upstairs with me. I've got a spare bed and a lock on the door. Tomorrow, we'll sort everything out." Victoria hesitated. "I don't want to trouble you." Celeste gave a small laugh. "Trouble me? I've seen my share of trouble, honey. You're not it. You're just lost, and lost folks deserve a safe place to land." That simple statement brought another wave of emotion. Victoria nodded, unable to find words. "Good," Celeste said with a satisfied tone. "Now eat that pie before it goes cold. The world always looks a little kinder on a full stomach." Victoria took a small bite. The flavor, warm, spiced, sweet, made her eyes close. For the first time all night, she felt safe enough to breathe. Celeste hummed softly as she locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. The bell jingled one last time. "You rest a minute, Victoria," she said gently. "Upstairs isn't far, and the world can wait till morning." Victoria watched her move about the small store, the tidy shelves, the old cash register, the faded photographs of families on the wall, and realized she had walked straight out of her worst nightmare into something she hadn't expected, genuine kindness. She sipped her coffee again, the heat warming her chest, and whispered softly, "Thank you." Celeste turned, smiling. "Don't thank me yet, baby. Wait till you've had some sleep. Morning always brings a little light, even after the darkest Halloween." Victoria hesitated when Celeste turned the store lights low and motioned toward the narrow staircase at the back. Every warning she'd ever heard about trusting strangers replayed in her head. She had no phone, no ID, no one who knew where she was. Following someone she'd just met upstairs in a quiet corner of the city went against every instinct she'd ever had. But when Celeste looked at her, there was no danger in her eyes, only warmth. Something about that gaze felt steady, like an anchor after a storm. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was something that only New Orleans could explain, but Victoria knew she could trust her. The stairs creaked softly as they climbed. Celeste led her into a small apartment above the market. The air smelled faintly of herbs and vanilla. Everything was spotless, the kind of tidy that comes from years of routine and love. Framed photographs lined the hallway, Children on front porches, a wedding picture from decades ago, faded shots of Mardi Gras parades. Small religious icons rested on shelves beside potted plants. The space radiated calm. Celeste gestured to a cozy bedroom across from hers. "This was my daughter's room," she said, turning on a small lamp. "She moved to Baton Rouge years ago, but I couldn't bring myself to change it much. Still feels like she might walk in any time." Victoria took in the soft quilt on the bed, the lace curtains, the stack of neatly folded towels at the foot. There was a nightgown laid out, simple cotton with tiny flowers. The thought that Celeste had prepared it for her without hesitation almost brought her to tears again. "I'll get you something warm to drink before bed," Celeste said. "You've had enough cold for one night." Victoria managed a faint smile. "You really don't have to." "I know," Celeste interrupted kindly. "But I want to." She disappeared into the small kitchen, returning minutes later with a steaming mug that smelled like chamomile and honey. Victoria accepted it with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Celeste sat in a chair near the door. "You don't have to thank me, sugar. You do the same for someone else. Life's too short to turn away when someone's hurting." They talked quietly as the night deepened. Celeste shared pieces of her life between sips of tea. Her husband, Henry, had died 5 years earlier. "Heart just gave out one morning," she said softly. 43 years we had that store together. He used to say it was our heartbeat." Her daughter had begged her to move after his death, but Celeste refused. "This neighborhood raised my babies," she explained. "These faces, these streets, they're part of me. I couldn't leave if I tried." Victoria listened, captivated. There was strength in the old woman's voice, steady, proud, but never bitter. When Celeste spoke of surviving Hurricane Katrina, Victoria could almost see it. The floodwaters creeping up, the wind howling, her standing firm behind those same wooden doors downstairs. "Everyone told me to evacuate," Celeste said. "But I stayed. Someone had to keep the lights on for whoever made it back." They both laughed softly when Celeste added, "I've been too stubborn to scare easy ever since." As the conversation flowed, Victoria found herself opening up too. She told Celeste about the photography career she'd once dreamed of, how she used to capture faces in small towns, light on quiet streets, moments that told stories without words. She admitted how she'd given it up piece by piece to follow David's job relocations, always believing their shared future mattered more than her own ambitions. "I kept telling myself it was love," she said quietly. "But somewhere along the way, I lost myself completely." Celeste nodded knowingly. "Love can make us forget who we are for a while. The trick is finding our way back." Victoria looked down at her mug, tears forming again. "Tonight just feels like the end of everything." Celeste leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "This Halloween feels like an ending, but every ending is just a beginning wearing a mask. You came for one story, but you're meant to leave with a different one." The words sank deep, heavier than comfort but warmer than pity. Victoria didn't know if it was wisdom or magic, but they made something inside her shift. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Outside, faint echoes of music still drifted through the open window. Distant laughter, the sound of a trumpet, the heartbeat of a city that never quite slept. Inside, the world felt still. Celeste rose and handed her a soft pillow. "Get some rest, baby. You've carried enough for one night." Victoria nodded, slipping into the borrowed nightgown. The fabric was warm against her skin, the simple kind of comfort she hadn't felt in months. She climbed into bed, pulling the quilt up to her chin. Celeste paused at the doorway, hand resting on the frame. "You're safe now, Victoria. Morning's coming soon." Victoria wanted to thank her again but couldn't find the right words. Gratitude filled her chest so fully it hurt. This woman owed her nothing, yet had given her everything: a place to rest, food, safety, and something even rarer, faith in people again. She listened to Celeste's soft footsteps fade down the hall, followed by the quiet click of the kitchen light turning off. The last thing Victoria heard before sleep took her was the muffled sound of jazz and laughter still echoing somewhere below, fading into the distance. For the first time in hours, she felt warmth instead of fear. Her body relaxed against the bed, her breathing steady, her heart calm. Outside, the city continued its celebration, but up here, in the soft glow of Celeste's daughter's old room, Victoria found peace. The darkness no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like something she'd passed through and survived. As she drifted off, she thought of Celeste's words about endings and beginnings. Maybe this night wasn't the end of her story after all. Maybe it was the quiet, unexpected beginning of her best chapter yet. The first thing Victoria noticed was the light. Soft golden sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, painting gentle patterns across the quilt. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then the scent of coffee and something sweet drifted through the open door, bayonets frying, sugar melting, and the memories returned like a calm tide. The store, Celeste, safety. She sat up slowly, still wearing the borrowed nightgown. Her reflection in the small oval mirror surprised her. The woman staring back didn't look broken anymore, just tired, but alive. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept through the night. Downstairs, Celeste was already moving about, humming an old tune as she worked. The morning light made the store glow. Trays of warm pastries sat on the counter, and the aroma of chicory coffee filled the air. Celeste looked up with a smile that could melt frost. "Well, there's our sleeping beauty," she teased. "I was beginning to think you'd drifted off for good." Victoria laughed softly. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. You missed the morning rush." Celeste poured her a mug of coffee, sliding it across the counter. "You're safe to breathe again." Only after a few sips did Victoria realize Celeste had already been busy fixing things she hadn't even known how to begin. The police had been contacted about her mugging. Celeste had spoken to a friend at a local bank to help her recover her account. She'd even called around the Marigny district and found a few bed and breakfast options. "I figured you'd need choices," Celeste said simply. "No one thinks clearly after a night like that." A knock at the door interrupted them. Celeste waved a hand. "That'll be Renee." A woman in her 40s stepped in, her resemblance to Celeste clear in her gentle eyes. She carried a tote bag and wore a smart blazer. "Morning, Mama. You must be Victoria." Victoria stood, still uncertain, but Renee's smile was effortless. "I brought a charger for your phone. Figured you'd need to connect with the world again." "Thank you," Victoria said, her throat tight. As the phone blinked to life, a rush of notifications filled the screen. 17 missed calls, a flood of messages from David. Apologies, explanations, pleas to talk. The sight that once would have sent her heart racing now left her strangely calm. His words felt hollow, like echoes from a life she'd already stepped away from. Renee watched quietly. "You don't owe him anything," she said gently. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who don't cherish you." Victoria didn't answer right away. She just nodded, staring at the phone that had once connected her to everything she thought she needed. She placed it face down on the counter. Breakfast was simple but perfect. Warm bayonets dusted with sugar, slices of mango and papaya, and more coffee poured into mismatched mugs. Celeste and Renee chatted about errands and the weather while Victoria soaked in the normalcy of it all. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if just for the morning. By late morning, they set out to the police station to file her report. The officer on duty was kind, taking her statement and promising to follow up. From there, Renee drove her to the bank, where Celeste's contact helped her access her funds and start the process of getting new identification. At the final stop, the bed and breakfast on Burgundy Street, the owners, a sweet older couple, greeted her with genuine concern. They'd heard about the mugging on the news and had even worried it might have been her after seeing her photo ID left behind. By early afternoon, everything was somehow in order again. Her room was reserved, her finances secure, and she had a place to stay. But as they drove through City Park, passing ancient oak trees whose branches dripped with moss like soft curtains, Victoria felt something shift inside her. "Celeste," she said quietly, "I don't want to leave yet. I've never done anything just for me. Not once." Celeste, who had been watching the road, smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time you did." They pulled over near a small pond where sunlight danced on the water. Children fed ducks while a man strummed a guitar on a nearby bench. It felt like the whole city was breathing easy. Celeste turned to her. "That room above my store is still empty. You could stay there for a while. Help me out a few hours a day, if you'd like. Use the rest of the time to explore. Find out what makes you feel alive again." Victoria looked out at the trees, the endless blue sky, the slow rhythm of life around her. The idea felt both terrifying and thrilling. "You'd really let me stay?" she asked. Celeste nodded. "You came to me lost, baby. But sometimes people show up not because they need saving, but because they're meant to start fresh. I don't think your story's finished here yet." Victoria smiled, a spark of courage rising from somewhere deep inside. "All right," she said. "Yes. I'll stay." It was an impulsive decision, but it felt right. The kind that comes after surviving something dark, the kind that proves you can start over. Celeste reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's the spirit. You made it through the worst night of your life. Now you get to decide who you become next." As they drove back toward the quarter, the sunlight spilled through the trees like a quiet promise. For the first time in years, Victoria didn't feel like she was running from something. She was walking toward herself. The days slipped into rhythm before Victoria even realized it. What began as a promise to stay for a week turned into 2, and 2 stretched quietly into more. The mornings at Thibodeau's market started early, always the same way, Celeste unlocking the door at dawn, the faint clink of keys, the smell of brewing coffee, and the soft rustle of newspapers arriving with the first light. Victoria would stand behind the counter, watching the city wake up. Delivery trucks rattled past, neighbors called good morning, and the air carried that familiar blend of coffee, sugar, and stories waiting to unfold. Celeste taught her everything, not just about running the register or stocking shelves, but about noticing people. She said that running a corner store wasn't about sales, it was about connection. "People come in for milk and bread," Celeste would say, "but they stay because they feel seen. This place reminds them they still matter." Victoria saw what she meant. There was the mailman who always joked about retiring but never would. The widowed teacher who came every Thursday for the same loaf of bread because it reminded her of her husband. The teenager who slipped in after school, pretending not to need help, and left smiling after Celeste quietly covered his snack. Celeste's kindness was subtle, an extra cookie tucked into a bag for a sad child, a free cup of coffee for someone who'd clearly had a hard day, a shelf stocked with a few items that didn't sell but were needed by someone struggling. Watching her, Victoria realized how much strength there was in simple compassion. By afternoon, when the rush slowed, Victoria would sling her camera over her shoulder and wander through the city. She rediscovered her eye for beauty, the way sunlight hit the stained glass of St. Louis Cathedral, the quiet dignity of weathered gravestones in Lafayette Cemetery, the rhythm of a street musician in Jackson Square, the gold light filtering through oak trees in Audubon Park. Each photo felt like a small prayer of gratitude. She started posting them on a new Instagram account, just to keep a visual journal. To her surprise, the images drew attention. Comments from strangers saying the photos felt peaceful, real, human. One day, while restocking shelves, Celeste waved her hand toward the door. "You've got to meet my favorite person who's not related to me." A man in his mid-30s walked in, carrying a book and wearing a linen shirt rolled at the sleeves. He had kind eyes and a quiet steadiness about him. "This is Gregory," Celeste said. "History teacher, troublemaker, loyal customer." Gregory laughed. "You make me sound better than I am, Miss Celeste." From that day on, he became part of Victoria's new routine. He'd stop by after school for coffee or a chat, always asking about her photography or sharing some obscure story about New Orleans history. Their conversations were easy, unhurried, genuine. He didn't fill silence for the sake of it. He didn't need her to perform or prove herself. Their first walk together was through the Garden District. Gregory pointed out the wrought iron balconies and told her how the area was once home to ship captains and poets. She captured the way sunlight touched each building, the quiet dignity of history preserved. The second walk took them along the Mississippi River walk at sunset. The water glowed orange and rose, and they talked about dreams, regrets, and how both of them had learned that peace doesn't come from having everything but from being present. By the third walk, their hands brushed and stayed together. There was no drama, no hesitation, just warmth and trust that felt like home. Still, one evening, sitting outside the market as the streetlights blinked on, Victoria said softly, "I'm only here temporarily. I don't want to lead you on." Gregory smiled, his tone calm. "Or you could just see where this goes. No pressure. Just possibility." It was the first time someone had offered her space to be herself without expectations. With David, she had always felt like a supporting character in someone else's story. With Gregory, she was the author of her own. Her photography continued to grow, evolving from quiet exploration to purpose. She began a project documenting the life of the neighborhood, the faces, the routines, the kindness that bound it all together. When a small coffee shop nearby offered to display her photos, she was nervous, but Celeste insisted. "Let people see what you see," she said. "Beauty is meant to be shared." The opening was modest, a few string lights, music from an old speaker, a handful of locals mingling between framed photos. But to Victoria, it felt monumental. Near the end of the evening, a young woman approached her, clutching a cup of coffee. "I read your story in the caption," she said. "About getting lost and being helped by someone kind. It gave me courage to leave a bad situation. I just wanted to thank you." The words stopped Victoria in her tracks. She had come to this city feeling invisible, broken. Yet somehow, by sharing her truth, she had become a small source of strength for someone else. Walking home that night, she looked up at the stars scattered across the sky and thought of Celeste's quiet wisdom, that kindness wasn't a single act, but a way of living. She finally understood what that meant. Her life had shifted from surviving to giving. Each day at the market, every photo she took, every gentle word exchanged, it all built upon the kindness that had once saved her. And now, it was spreading outward, touching lives she might never even meet. For the first time in years, she wasn't chasing happiness. She was creating it. The bell above the door chimed as laughter and music spilled into Thibodeau's market. A full year had passed since the night Victoria Reed had stumbled inside, frozen, terrified, and lost. Now the store glowed with orange string lights and the warm scent of pumpkin bread and caramel apples. Paper bats fluttered from the ceiling, and children in costumes darted between the shelves. The air carried something rare, a feeling of belonging that wrapped around everyone who entered. Celeste stood near the counter, wearing her favorite purple cardigan and a witch's hat with a bent brim. Her silver hair caught the golden light. Beside her, Victoria adjusted a display of framed photographs, a timeline of hope. The first photo showed the market's green neon sign glowing in a dark street. The next, Celeste handing coffee to a customer. Then faces, neighbors, musicians, families, people who'd once been strangers and were now bound by something stronger than proximity, care. Gregory arrived in his jazz musician costume, trumpet slung over his shoulder, grinning as he handed Victoria a bouquet of marigolds. For the woman who made the ghosts of this street smile again. His tone was teasing, but his eyes were sincere. Renee entered next with her husband and little boy, carrying a basket of homemade pralines. The young woman from Victoria's first gallery showing followed, her smile confident, her energy radiant. One by one, the neighborhood gathered, people from all walks of life, each carrying a piece of what Celeste had built. Victoria stepped back and looked around. The shelves gleamed. The tables overflowed with treats. The market buzzed with the heartbeat of community. And at the center of it all hung a large framed portrait. Celeste, captured mid-laugh, her eyes kind and wise. "Y'all have turned my little store into something beautiful," Celeste said, her voice soft but strong enough to carry. "You've made it exactly what I always hoped it would be, a home for everyone who walks through that door." The chatter softened. Gregory squeezed Victoria's hand. Something in Celeste's tone made her chest tighten. Celeste took a deep breath. "I've been doing some thinking. 43 years running this place, it's been my joy. But my daughter keeps reminding me that I'm not getting any younger. So," she paused, eyes glistening, "I've decided it's time to retire. I'm moving to Baton Rouge to be closer to Renee and my grandbabies." The room went quiet. Victoria's heart dropped. She forced a smile, but the words came out shaky. "Celeste, that's wonderful. You deserve to rest." "It's wonderful," Celeste said gently, "but I know what you're thinking. This neighborhood won't be the same." Tears pricked Victoria's eyes. "It won't." Celeste reached out and squeezed her hand. "That's why I wanted to talk to you before I made it official. The building's owner wants to sell, to the right person. Someone who understands what this place means. Someone who knows it's more than a business." Victoria blinked. "You mean?" Celeste nodded, eyes twinkling. "I mean you, sugar." Victoria froze. "Me? I can't, Celeste. I don't know the first thing about running a store." "Oh, hush," Celeste said with a smile. "You've been running it in spirit for months. You know every regular's name. You bake half the muffins. You make folks feel safe here. That's the real job." "But my photography." Celeste's grin widened. "That back room's been waiting for a studio. You can have both. You don't have to choose." The noise of laughter and music returned, but for Victoria, everything went still. She looked around, the people she'd come to love, the market that had become a symbol of second chances, the life she'd built from the ashes of one terrible night. A year ago, she had been broken, wandering streets that felt endless and cruel. Now, she stood surrounded by warmth and light. This wasn't just a corner store anymore. It was proof that kindness could rewrite a person's story. Tears filled her eyes, but her smile was steady. "Yes," she said softly. "Absolutely yes." Celeste's face softened. "I knew the moment you stumbled through that door you were meant to be here." Victoria laughed through her tears. "You saved my life." Celeste shook her head. "No, baby. I gave you a safe place to save yourself." The room filled with applause as Celeste wrapped her arms around her. Outside, the sounds of Halloween drifted through the open door. Music, laughter, the distant hum of the city that had once terrified her. Now, it felt like home. Later that night, as the celebration wound down, Victoria stepped out to the sidewalk. The same green neon sign flickered above her head, just as it had 1 year ago. But tonight, the darkness didn't feel heavy. It felt alive, with memory, with gratitude, with possibility. Gregory joined her, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "So," he said, smiling at the glowing windows, "what do we call it now?" "Thibodeau's Market and Studio." Victoria looked up at the sign and nodded. "No," she said quietly. "We keep her name. It's still Celeste's heart. I'm just the one keeping the light on." Inside, Celeste laughed with her daughter, music played from an old radio, and neighbors clinked glasses in a toast that felt like both goodbye and beginning. Victoria turned toward the door, ready to join them, her reflection faint in the window, stronger, steadier, at peace. A stranger's kindness had once saved her from the darkest Halloween. Now, it was her turn to keep that light burning for someone else. 2 years had passed, but Thibodeau's Market looked almost exactly the same. The green neon sign still buzzed faintly over the doorway, the bell still jingled with every entrance, and the air still smelled faintly of sweet potato pie and freshly brewed chicory coffee. Only one thing had changed. Victoria now stood behind the counter, greeting customers with the same warmth Celeste once offered her. Every shelf, every corner carried Celeste's spirit. The handwritten recipe cards still hung by the register. The same local paper boy still came by at dawn for his cocoa. Victoria made sure nothing sacred was lost. But she also left her own mark. A wall near the coffee section now displayed rotating photographs, portraits of neighborhood life, captured through her lens, a grandmother braiding her granddaughter's hair, a musician tuning his saxophone at sunset, a couple dancing in the street. Across from it hung a corkboard labeled Community Corner, where neighbors posted needs, offers, and notes of encouragement. And in the back room, once storage, Victoria had built a small portrait studio where she photographed locals for free every Sunday afternoon. Gregory helped on weekends, hauling deliveries, fixing squeaky hinges, and making every customer laugh. During quiet hours, he read history books at the counter while Victoria edited photos. Their rhythm was easy, built on respect and shared purpose. Celeste called every Sunday evening from Baton Rouge, her voice full of life. "The grandbabies are keeping me busy," she'd say, "but I check your Instagram every day. You're doing me proud, baby." Victoria always smiled at that. "You taught me everything that matters." The young woman from her first art showing had returned too, this time as a social work student. "You helped me," she said one afternoon, eyes shining. "Now I want to help others. We pass it on." Halloween remained the most special night of all. Each year, Victoria kept the store open late, lights glowing brighter than the rest of the block. Children in costumes crowded the counter for candy, while parents sipped hot cider. She watched the faces of those who lingered longer than necessary, the ones who looked a little lost, and always found a reason to keep them company. When people asked if she ever worried she'd made a mistake giving up her old life, Victoria's answer never changed. "The only thing I'm afraid of," she'd say, "is who I would have become if I'd stayed where I didn't belong." In the spring, she and Gregory planned to marry under the ancient oaks of City Park. Celeste would be there, of course, front row, hat in hand, smiling like she'd known this ending all along. The story of the market had become something of a neighborhood legend. People told it like a fairy tale with real names. They said the store had a soul, that it healed people who came through its door. Victoria never corrected them. Maybe they were right. Its impact showed in small, beautiful ways. A teenager started volunteering to restock shelves after school. A customer quietly paid for a stranger's groceries. Neighbors checked on one another after storms. These weren't random acts. They were the quiet echoes of a legacy. "Kindness isn't weakness," Victoria often said to anyone who would listen. "It's revolutionary. Every time we choose kindness over fear, we push back against everything trying to make us small." She'd learned that the market wasn't just a business, it was a heartbeat for the community. A place where people could slow down, breathe, and be seen. What she hadn't known that Halloween night years ago was that accepting kindness would reshape her entire existence. Her relationship with Gregory had grown into something steady and real. He never tried to outshine her dreams. He only helped her chase them. Her photography flourished too. Galleries in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, even Houston displayed her work. Yet her favorite photos remained the ones taken right here, ordinary faces glowing under soft morning light. She often thought about what Celeste had taught her. "The world is as kind as we make it," she'd said. "Every interaction is a choice." Victoria repeated those words often, like a quiet prayer. One evening, she sat alone on the steps of the market, thinking about the word saved. Once, it had meant survival. Now, it meant something deeper. She hadn't just been saved from danger that Halloween night. She'd been saved from a smaller version of herself. From a life lived in fear. Celeste had shown her that courage isn't loud or dramatic. It's choosing compassion, even when the world feels cruel. "Every day, we're writing our story," Celeste had told her once. "You decide if it's about fear or courage." 3 years after that first terrifying Halloween, Victoria stood by the window, watching children in bright costumes race past. The street sparkled with porch lights and laughter. She wished she could whisper to her younger self, to tell her that everything would be okay. Gregory slipped his arm around her waist. "You know what Celeste would say," he murmured. "You saved each other." Victoria smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. She'd be right. Because kindness was never one-directional. Every time she opened her door, every smile she gave, every stranger she welcomed, it rippled outward, reaching farther than she'd ever see. She unlocked the door one more time that Halloween night as a group of trick-or-treaters approached. The bell chimed, and warmth spilled into the cool air. She handed out cookies, laughed with parents, and made sure every child left feeling special. For a brief moment, she felt it, a presence, gentle and familiar. Celeste, watching, proud. This is how we save each other, Victoria thought. Not through grand gestures, but through daily choices to see, help, and trust one another. The night that once brought her to her knees had given her a purpose, a home, and a new way of living. Each small act she offered now sent another ripple outward, brightening the world one open door at a time. One act of kindness can change a life forever, sometimes even your own. Have you ever experienced or shown kindness that changed someone's world? Share your story in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true-to-life stories. If Victoria's journey touched your heart, like and share this video so her message reaches someone who needs it tonight. Thank you for being part of this community, and remember, the smallest kindness can be the light someone's waiting for. Tomorrow's story will remind you that hope often begins in the unlikeliest moments.